Patch 5.3 of Genshin Impact brought a lot of impactful content, such as the finale of the main natlan story arc, Lantern Rite, and most importantly, 3 new characters, including the release of the Pyro Archon Mavuika. As with most Archon releases, Mavuika has brought a lot of discussion about meta, tier list, and power creep, and deservedly so, as combined with Citlali, these 2 character releases have significantly changed Genshin's meta when concerning the strongest and most optimal teams that exist. So with Natlan's Archon patch at an end, I wanted to analyze why both Mavuika and Citlali are so strong and how they affect Genshin's meta. I have already made in-depth guides on both of these characters, and I highly suggest checking them out for more info on things like builds and teams. However, in this video, I will also highlight some important new findings from theory crafters after testing them in game, while also providing updated DPS calcs with this new info. Before we talk about Mavuika, we should first talk about Citlali, as most of Mavuika's strength as a DPS is enabled by Citlali alone, making her arguably Mavuika's best support. Much of the pre-release TC analysis and conclusions about Citlali have generally been correct even after post-release. Although Citlali's shield is relatively weak when compared to other shielders, the shield is really just a small extra benefit that Citlali provides. Mainly in teams that trigger freeze or melt, Citlali provides 20% pyro and hydro res shred, 40% damage bonus from 4-piece scroll, some non-negligible personal damage if you melt her burst, and easy to access off-field cryo application on top of any additional buffs from her weapon choice. While Citlali still works fine for buffing cryo carries with 4-piece scroll and is fine in buffing hydro DPSs and freeze teams, her main niche that she really shines in is forward melt teams. Because of her strong buffs on top of her shield, off-field cryo application, and personal damage, Citlali enables forward melt teams to be some of the top meta teams in the game, which is a huge buff to the team archetype compared to before her release when you had to rely on characters like Rosaria and Kaya for melts, who both give little to no buffs to the pyro carry at all. Some of the main pyro carry Citlali buffs include Mavuika, Arlecchino, Diluc Plunge, and Gaming Plunge. On top of providing the cryo app needed for melts, Citlali's buffs make her an additional Kazuha or Shilonen-like buffer for these pyro carries, making her an extremely powerful support. So much so that in these teams, playing Citlali melt is pretty much a strict damage upgrade than playing Furina Vape, and because of this, a good amount of people consider Citlali a better meta support than Furina, because the most optimal teams for several pyro carries isn't Furina Vape, but Citlali melt. Now personally, I think that Furina's versatility still makes her an overall better character than Citlali, but this still speaks to the fact that Citlali is an extremely strong support for the teams that can utilize her buffs. However, one detail found post-release that makes Citlali actually better than expected is that through certain attack combos, Citlali's cryo application alone is able to enable the pyro carry to melt a lot more attacks than initially assumed. Because of this, you don't need to run double cryo in order to enable more melts, allowing you to run stronger supports like Kazuha or Shilonen. Now that we've discussed why Citlali is such a strong support, let's talk about Mavuika. The one simple reason why Mavuika is such a meta-defining unit is because she does a lot of damage as a DPS, significantly more than any character we've seen in Genshin. From pre-release TC and Calcs, we kind of already knew that this was going to be the case. However, Mavuika is actually better than we expected due to learning that Citlali can actually enable more melts for Mavuika than initially assumed with new rotations. First, let's talk about the rotation setup before the main Mavuika combo in her melt teams. In her best team with Citlali, Shilonen, and Bennett, the setup is Mavuika skill to apply Pyro, Shilonen skill into 2 normal attacks to activate her Res Shred and get the Pyro crystallized for Archaic Petra if Shilonen is using it, Bennett skill into Burst for his attack buff, Citlali skill into Burst to clear the Pyro aura and apply Cryo, and lastly swap to Mavuika to burst and do her combo. If you have high ping, adding in one Citlali normal attack before swapping to Mavuika can help ensure a Cryo aura onto the enemy. If you don't have Shilonen, you can use an anima support like Sucrose and Kazuha and the team is still very strong. For the setup, just do Bennett's abilities first, then swap to Sucrose or Kazuha to use their skill, then continue on with Citlali. In terms of Mavuika's attack combo, before release, most calcs assumed that Citlali alone would only be able to melt Mavuika's burst and 2 of her charge attacks consistently with the 8 charge attack plus finisher combo. This is the easiest combo since all you have to do is hold down the attack button and Mavuika will do her charged attacks automatically. And even at this baseline combo, Mavuika's team DPS is still some of the highest we've seen in Genshin. However, there are 2 main newfound combos that allow Mavuika to melt even more attacks, thus dealing more damage. First is to do Mavuika's burst, 4 charged attacks, jump to stop attacking, then continue doing the other 4 charged attacks and the finisher. This jump allows time for cryo to reapply onto the enemy, allowing Mavuika to melt her burst and 4 of her charged attacks. This is actually really easy to do and very consistent, and is about a 12% damage increase over the baseline combo. The second is Mavuika's best damaging combo, which does require a bit of practice but can be performed in game fairly consistently, assuming the enemy doesn't move around all over the place. This combo involves bursting, then doing 3 charged attacks with a finisher, dash cancelling, doing the 3 charged attacks with a finisher and another dash cancel another time, and ending it with 1 charged attack and a finisher. The reason this combo is significantly better is that instead of melting Mavuika's burst and 4 of her charged attacks, this combo melts Mavuika's burst, 1 charge attack, and all 3 of her finishers. The finisher attack occurs at the end of Mavuika's charge attack when you let go of holding down the attack button. This is the attack where she jumps off of her motorcycle and slams down, and this attack has a higher multiplier than a charged attack. Thus, melting these attacks results in about a 25% increase in damage over the baseline combo. After struggling with learning this combo myself, I found that there are 2 main things you need to know in order to perform this combo consistently. First, when you do your 3 charged attacks, you want to make sure that you let go of the attack button to perform your finisher while Mavuika is halfway into her 4th charge attack. If you do it too fast, your second set of charged attacks and finisher will not melt the proper attacks. Second, you want to make sure that you perform your dash cancel very quickly to maintain proper timing of cryo application. If you dash for too long, you delay your second set of 3 charged attacks into a finisher, resulting in improper melts. So when performing this combo, you want to count that Mavuika's charge attack hits 1, 2, 3 times, release halfway into her next circle, quick dash, repeat the same thing, then finally do 1 charge attack and let go for the final finisher. Even without Citlali for melt, Mavuika is still very strong in vape teams with Xilonen and either Farina or Yelan. While the support setup is a bit different for both of them, Mavuika's best attack combo is the same for both. Charged attack twice with a quick dash cancel for a total of 4 times, then end with 2 charge attacks and a finisher. The start of each charge attack includes a normal attack animation, so Yelan's burst will proc. This combo is a bit tight to fit in everything, so you will have to do quick dash cancels immediately after you see Mavuika hit the enemy twice with her charge attacks. Here is a damage comparison done by hyperwebster between Mavuika's different combos in melt teams. As I mentioned already, compared to the baseline combo of 8 charge attacks plus a finisher, adding in the jump for 4 charge attack melts is a 12% increase, while doing the full 3 finisher combo is a 25% increase. For teams where precise reactions aren't important, such as shove versus overload, the 3 finisher combo still results in a buff for those teams as the finishers have higher multipliers. And because reaction timing is unimportant, performing this combo will be very easy and is just a strict damage upgrade. With these optimized combos, a few important things changed about Mavuika. In terms of builds for main DPS, her best artifact sets and stats are still the same: Go 4-piece Obsidian Codex and EM Hourglass, Power Damage Goblet, Crit Damage Circlet. For her best weapon choices, there are some minor changes. Because you can consistently get more melts with the new Mavuika combos, Elemental Mastery has become an even better stat than it already was. Thus, even though free-to-play weapons like Mailed Flower have passives that don't have enough uptime to utilize their passives, the EM substat is very valuable, making it her new clear best free-to-play weapon for melt teams. Lastly, and most importantly, her team DPS has increased with the optimized combos. Here I will show and compare hyperwebster's calcs from both pre-release and post-release. Huge thanks to him for allowing me to showcase his calcs in this video. Melt teams have gotten a significant increase, especially her best team with Citlali, Xilonen, and Bennett. But even using Sucrose or Kazuha instead of Xilonen, the team's DPS is extremely high. All of these melt teams managed to sheet over 100k DPS, which is unheard of for any other DPS at C0. Even though Mavuika vape teams are considered worse than her melt teams, they are still able to reach around 100k DPS with the optimized vape combo, which is still extremely good. And lastly, even without Citlali or Xilonen, Mavuika's shove versus overload teams with Oberon is still very solid. It may be considered weak in the context of Mavuika's other teams, but calcing at around 90k DPS still makes it comparable with the best teams of other top tier DPSs in Genshin. And with all this talk about Mavuika being so strong as a main DPS, remember that she still has the ability of being a strong off-field support. Assuming you don't need Xiangling's level up pyro application, which is only needed for a few teams, a lot of characters have gotten buffed by Mavuika, including Kanich, Chaska, Molani, Navia, Cloran, and Risley. As an off-field support, she can provide personal damage with her burst, a buff to the on-field character with her A4 passive, and can hold 4-piece scroll if needed to provide even more damage bonus. And most importantly, her off-field power application is much more convenient than Xiangling's, being a shorter cooldown and not reliant on high ER requirements. The reason why Mavuika and Citlali break Genshin's meta is because their team's damage is significantly higher than any other top DPS teams at equal investment. And with with constellations like Citlali's and Mavuika's C2s, their damage further skyrocket. I don't think Citlali is bad power creep because she buffs the forward melt archetype, which wasn't considered very good before her release. Buffing weaker team archetypes with the release of newer, stronger characters that synergize with these teams has always, in my opinion, been a good way to diversify strong team building. On top of that, Citlali brings Cryo back into the spotlight after being neglected for so long. So Citlali being a very strong but somewhat niche support is fine for the game. Mavuika's release, on the other hand, is a bit more controversial in terms of power creep. The comfort she provides as an off-field support is definitely a welcome addition, and Xiangling still has her place with her level up pyro application. So Mavuika as a Xiangling alternative or upgrade is fine. But as a main DPS, Mavuika arguably does too much damage. I think Jason's video on Mavuika does a good job explaining how Mavuika power creeps other characters while showing plenty of calcs comparing damage numbers, so I highly suggest checking it out yourself. I will discuss some of the main points here. A while ago, the Genshin Scientist DPS chart comparing Mavuika and Nevulette's personal DPS was getting large attention within the community. But while the math is correct, as he himself pointed out, it is only considering their personal damage, and in Nevulette teams, units like Farina do a significant amount of damage. However, even if we do consider team DPS, Mavuika's best teams still outperform any other team in the game. The best Nevulette and Arlecchino teams will do about 90 to 95k DPS on paper, with Mavuika's baseline combo of 8 charge attacks plus the finisher, which I think most players will use since it's the simplest. Mavuika's vape teams are around at the same level, and Mavuika's melt teams are slightly ahead. When we add in Mavuika's more optimized combos, then Mavuika's damage becomes significantly higher, especially in her melt teams. It wouldn't be wrong to say that Mavuika's best teams deal 20 to 30% more damage than Nevulette's and Arlecchino's best team. This amount of damage is unprecedented, and it's quite crazy to think that Mavuika can be significantly ahead of both Arlecchino and Nevulette, who are both considered the two best DPSs in the game. Because Arlecchino is also a pyro DPS and fulfills the same role as Mavuika, it is very common to compare the two directly. While Arlecchino can perform better in multi-wave scenarios and in unreacted teams like Mono Pyro and Shepherd's Overload, Mavuika has much more quality of life in her kit. While Arlecchino cannot get healed and doesn't get resistance to interruption without a shielder or C1, Mavuika can get healed, has resistance to interruption during her burst duration, and has very big AoE on her charged attacks. Mavuika has very little downsides in playing her kit, yet she does significantly more damage than her in her best teams, to the point where even a C0 Mavuika with no signature performs similarly to a C1 Arlecchino or a C0 Arlecchino with her signature. Now, one common criticism with Mavuika's kit is that her team building is more restrictive. In a more casual context, I think this is a fair critique. For example, if we have a Mavuika team where you have to use units like Kachina or Pyro Traveler and compare that with a more suboptimal Arlecchino team with units like Xingqiu or Lan Yan, though the damage of the two teams may be similar, playing Arlecchino with more suboptimal units will definitely feel less bad than playing Mavuika with more suboptimal units, as consuming Night Soul points is key for Mavuika being able to actually use her burst. However, in a more optimized context, which is what I consider when talking about Genshin's meta, Mavuika isn't more restrictive than other units. Her best melt team requires Citlali, Xilonen, and Bennett, 2 limited 5 stars. Arlecchino's best team uses Citlali or Yelan, Xilonen, and Bennett, also 2 limited 5 stars. We can even replace Xilonen with Sucrose for both, and we have one of Mavuika's strongest melt teams with just Citlali, 1 limited 5 star. Contrast that with Nevulette's best team with Farina, Kazuha, and Xilonen, all limited 5 stars. And sure, you may be able to replace Kazuha with someone like Lan Yan and the team is still strong, but if you replace any of the limited 5 stars in this team, the team will significantly drop in damage. So in my opinion, from an optimized meta standpoint, Mavuika isn't any more restrictive than other top DPSs. When Dendro was introduced and Hyperbloom was considered the best team comp in Genshin by the community, it was somewhat jokingly said that Hyperbloom was the best team comp for almost any DPS, such as the weaker ones. Eula's best team, just run Hyperbloom with her on the team. But now with the Mavuika and Citlali pairing, I think it's fair to say that this team core, combined with Bennett or Xilonen, can be the quote best team for any character in the game, with Mavuika Melt doing all the work. Now ultimately, does it really matter that Mavuika is, on paper, significantly stronger than every other DPS in the game? Not really. Both Arlecchino and Nevulette are still extremely strong and will easily clear endgame content. Other top DPSs and strong team archetypes also perform very well in Spiral Bliss, and you can still clear with DPSs that are considered not as meta, or even with a a roster of full 4 stars. Genshin doesn't have that hard of an endgame to have to worry that much about meta. However, the trend of releasing stronger characters is a bit concerning as Spiralbus HP pools are always increasing. Discussing power creep and Genshin as a whole can be an entire separate video, but it is clear that newer characters are getting stronger overall, especially DPSs. Even though you definitely can still clear with older characters, it is definitely easier to do so with newer 5 stars. Genshin's power creep has been slow, but it also has been ramping up recently, with Mavuika's release being a clear spike of power creep. And unfortunately, just like how new DPSs were being compared to Neuvillette and Arlecchino for their power level, they will now inevitably have to be compared with Mavuika. Both Mavuika and Citlali have no doubt made their mark on Genshin's meta with their unprecedented high team damage. Will HOYOverse release new DPSs that will slowly try to match Mavuika's power level, or will Mavuika be an outlier? Eventually, I think it will happen. That is the nature of gacha games. How soon will it happen? I'm not entirely sure. Hopefully not too soon, but I also wouldn't be surprised if more aggressive power creep will continue being the norm. I hope you all enjoyed this meta, power creep, and post-release analysis video on Mavuika and Citlali. Big thanks to hyperwebster for allowing me to showcase his updated Mavuika calcs in this video. If you like this type of content or found it interesting, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave your thoughts and any questions in the comments below, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.